What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Just want to say Chess Audiobooks is on Lichess, chess.com, Instagram, and Twitter. So please follow me on those platforms. Thank you once again for joining me here on the channel. Please hit the thumbs up. Please check the links below for more content, and consider supporting the channel using those links below also. We're going to look at a game between the Polish GM and very talented Grandmaster Jan Duda with the white pieces versus Hungarian Grandmaster Richard Rapport. And this is a game from 2022, so a recent game from the Viking Z tournament. This game took me a long time to analyze, and hopefully I can crystallize it down so that it's not a super long video. I'll try to not get into all of the notes. I mean, this game, I had to keep going back and back because each time I thought I was done, I would recheck and something else would just pop out at me. So I want to ask the audience out there, do you think either one of these guys has a chance maybe in the next couple of years of becoming world champion? What do you think their chances are? I know you have Firouzja out there. You have the old guys, now old, right? Fabiano Caruana, MVL, guys like that. But what do you think of this next crop of players? Do you think Richard Rapport has a chance becoming world champion? What about Duda? What about Dubov? Firouzja? Let me know in the comments below what you think. But right now we're gonna get into this game, and I hope I can spread the love for this game that I have to you guys out there. So the game started off d4 from Duda, knight f6 from Rapport. Both players were rated around 2760, so very even matchup here. Knight f3, d5, bishop f4. So we have some type of London system forming on board, but then Richard Rapport plays bishop f5. And so now looking at maybe like a Baltic system, but if white plays a c4 and then you get this bishop takes b1 and all of this crazy stuff. For those of you who don't know, Rapport is known for playing in a like unorthodox style. He reminds me of a modern version of Alexander Morozevich. Again, get in the comments below if you agree or you disagree with that statement, especially you older chess players that might remember Morozevich. That's what he reminds me of. He chooses these like kind of offbeat openings that in systems that nobody really plays, but then somehow he makes them work. Just like Morozevich, Richard Rapport is also a Chigorin's defense player. You can look up and find several games of him playing the black side of the Chigorin's defense, which is one of those defenses that you never see played anymore at the highest levels, but Richard Rapport is willing to do that. c4, e6, e3, knight bd7, and now queen b3, exploiting the absence of the bishop from the protection of b7. It's hard to put a label on this really as far as the opening, but it's kind of like, just sidelines, I guess, right? London system sidelines, Queen's Gambit sidelines. So it's kind of like a quirky looking position already. But what I think Richard Rapport does is I think he gets into these he opens up in an unorthodox way, but then he researches very deeply in these positions, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So he plays bishop g3, bishop d6, bishop g3 is the response. D takes c4, right? B takes e4, so he gives up the center, and now rook b8, protecting that pawn. Knight c3, and if you look at white's position, it looks pretty normal and straightforward, right? Black's looks kind of weird, right, with this bishop on f5. It looks like black has gotten away with some violations here, right? A little bit. The knight on the position of the knight on d7, pawn still on c7, rook on b8 looks kind of weird, right? But there's really no way for white to really exploit it right away. All right. So here after knight c3, Rapport plays b5, and this has to be preparation. He plays b5. It looks crazy because the pawn, of course, is attacked by 3 pieces: bishop, knight, and queen. So how can he get away with this? Well, if bishop takes b5, then you have bishop takes g3, h takes g3, and then c5. And you can see the rook on b8 is creating a pin against the bishop on b5 on the queen. So the bishop would be lost. And the same thing would happen if Rapport took with the knight. And it's important too to take on g3 first, because this bishop would be bishop on d6 would be hanging susceptible to capture by the bishop on g3. So black would take first and then play c6. So that's the idea behind b5, of course. The downside of b5 is that, of course, pawns can't be once they're pushed, you can't take the move back. So you see the weakness left behind subsequently on a6 and c6. Okay, so bishop e2, castles, rook d1, queen e7, and now knight e5. And you can see there's a threat that I've highlighted of knight c6. And this is why I believe this is preparation by Rapport, like in this kind of offbeat position. Because in this point, he ignores this threat of c6, knight to c6, and plays b4 anyway. All right. And it's like he wants to provoke this move, knight c6. However, Duda, who has to be just playing chess, right? There's no way he could have prepared for this. He plays his move knight a4. Now let's look at what happens on knight c6. The position is just bonkers. It's wild. Now I sound like Maurice Ashley, right? It's out of control. It's explosions on the board, right? All right. So if knight c6, b takes c3. Now you can see the rook attacking the queen. Rook on b8 attacks the queen. Knight takes e7, check. Bishop takes e7. So black sacrifices his queen. And just to give you an example now, if queen takes c3, then it's all over for white. So instead of queen c3, let's say queen c4, c2, hitting the rook, rook c1, knight b6. This is all my analysis. Queen b5. If queen a6, because the purpose of queen b5 is to guard the b4 square, so the dark square bishop cannot check on that square. So if queen a6, then this will happen: bishop b4 check, king f1, and bishop d2 hitting the rook. All right, this is very complicated stuff. So queen b5, knight b d5, exposing the rook. Rook attack on the queen. Queen c6, rook takes b2, and that's where I left it off at. And again, the position is up for grabs. This is like super wild, and it's definitely gonna favor the stronger chess player, the better prepared chess player. But it's just absolutely bonkers here. I don't know how far Duda saw into this, but this move is very tempting to make. Knight c6, hitting the rook and queen, and you have the check on the queen on e7. But his instincts turn him away from that line. He played knight a4, and now knight c6 is a legitimate threat. Therefore, Rapport plays bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and now knight e4. Okay, and now again, here's another important point in the game here. Duda plays the move f3 here. Of course, it provokes the knight to just take the bishop. So just losing the bishop here. So knight takes g3, h takes g3, and now Rapport plays knight c5. And to me, I was suspicious of this move when I first saw it. The reason why is, first of all, the knight on a4 is bad. It's out of the game right now. So why waste this tempo playing knight to c5 so white can just exchange it? Okay, I felt, and this was my instincts without analyzing anything, I felt that knight takes e5, capturing toward the center, was better. Just capture the pawn and let white work out his own problems. Don't solve your opponent's problems. And that's what I felt knight c5 was doing. I felt knight c5 was kind of like almost like a superficial move there. After knight takes e5, play could go e4, of course, bishop g6, shutting the bishop out of the game. And this is what happens too in a lot of Queen's Gambit decline lines, where bishop f5 is played in Slav lines primarily, where the bishop comes to f5, is black has to be careful that the bishop doesn't get shut out of the game or for long periods of the game. Queen c2, for example, queen g5, rook h3, queen e3, and again you have a game pretty much up for grabs. See, and then at this point, black pretty much has to trade queens there. And again, you have both sides with chances, right? It's an unbalanced position. So after knight takes g3, h takes g3, knight c5 here, well, white is just obliged to take. Knight takes c5, queen takes c5, and now we can see, whoops, the queen takes c5, we can see the attack on this pawn right here. Okay, so Rapport is gonna, win this pawn back. I just want to go back 1 second to this move f3. Another option that Duda had is f4, just protecting his pawn. However, if f4, rook f d8, castles, knight b6, bishop to e1, rook takes, bishop takes, knights get traded off, and again you have a a very unbalanced game. But you can see here black is getting stronger and stronger and is a little better here. The reason why black is a little better, in spite of his pawn weaknesses on the queen side, you can see that the move f4 has severely weakened the light squares. See, the bishop is strong on f5, knight is very strong in e4, and white's bishop here is kind of out of the game. With all of these closed files and ranks, it's very hard for the bishops to find good diagonals at this moment, and that rook on f1 is pretty much shut out the game. So this is really a good game for black's minor pieces, as you can see. All right, so this is why I believe Duda avoided the move f4, holding on to the material. Instead, he played f3. And I like Duda's instincts. I think that's why I titled this video with the question, next future world chess champion, because I like Duda's instincts. I like how he avoided that move knight c6 earlier and getting the queen with check. It's like his positional instincts are very, very sharp. And here, right, avoiding trying to hold on to the pawn, but respecting the position. And notice now that the knight has traded the bishop off. Yes, he loses the bishop here, but remember, the bishop here is not that useful in the position. Okay? So he's like, all right, take the bishop here. What does he get in return? He gets the open h-file, so he gets free development on his rook. And this is an indictment against Rapport, because by looking at these games, we can see the strong points and the weaknesses of the players. And what I see from Rapport is I see him more or less being willing to give his opponent opportunities, right, and improving his in this game at least, improving his opponent's position. How is he doing it? Well, he takes the bishop here, but now he's developed the rook on the h file for free. The rook doesn't have to move. The rook is automatically developed. The other move that I mentioned or alluded to earlier was knight c5, is just solving the problem of what to do with this knight on a4. Okay, that helps white out. For what? Just to get this scraggly pawn here. Now watch what happens as a result. So back to the game, of course, after knight takes c5, queen takes c5, king f2. Again, dude is not interested in trying to play f4 and protect that pawn. He allows Rapport to take the pawn. Queen takes e5. Go ahead, take it. But now watch what happens. Rook d7. Penetrating into the position. a5. Again, trying to hold on to the material. Now Rapport he's being like Victor Korchnoi, right? He's holding on to material because he doesn't want to just play, say, like rook, a move like rook to d8. Because after rook d8, Duda would simply just trade off pawns. Trade off rooks, a pair of rooks, and grab this pawn. This is why, in an attempt to hold the material, Rapport plays a5 first, and then now he plans on defending the d file. But it's too late. Rook hd1. So now let's take an assessment. For the price of a pawn, white has total domination of the d file, right? Because how's black going to oppose? He has to play maybe move like queen f6 and try to work it out. But what happens now is if black tries to organize any opposition on the d file with his rooks, remember those early pawn pushes with b5 and now you see a5, those pawns are going to fall, right? Those pawns are going to fall, right? Like those red berries in the summertime off street. You just brush the bush and the berries just fall on the ground because those pawns have been pushed early in their week. Look at white's pawns. They're still the A and B pawns still right where they are, and the king has a little like kind of makeshift castle there where black's queenside pawns are very loose. So even if he's able to organize some type of exchanges on a d file or something like that, it's going to be very hard to protect those pawns. All right. The lesson and moral of that story is you have to be careful pushing your pawns early. Of course, Rapport knows this, but this is his style. He's a very dynamic player, aggressive, and he's staying true to his style. So Rapport plays h5 here. e4. Remember what I said earlier about shutting the bishop out. Rook goes to the second rank. h4, trying to create some dynamic chances. Of course, g takes, and now queen h2. Problem here with all of these queen moves is that white is not really in any danger, right? This doesn't change the static nature of the position, which is that it's better for white, because the queen getting a check here and check there is not going to really change anything. This command over the d file and the 7th rank is very powerful, right? An engine might say that it's equal or close to equal, but just positionally this is crushing, and with the bishop on g6 out of the game like that. Let's keep going and see what happened. Queen takes h4 and g3. Queen h5. Queen e3. c5. King to g2. a4. Bishop c4. So white is just optimizing his pieces. Bishop on c4 is always dangerous, especially when you have this pawn configuration with e6, f7, because at certain points there's sacrifices on e6, sometimes on f7. You just have to wait for it. Again, this is a result of pushing those pawns and creating weakness in the position. A3 from report, and B3. So now again, the pawn majority on the queen side for black is not even effective. It's been crippled, been stopped. As I always talk about in my videos, if you can stop the pawns, the pawn majority, cripple the pawns, then they just become targets and liabilities. So you can see those pawns are fixed, so they're just targets. White's pawns are fixed too on the king side, but on his queen side, but his pawns are in his territory, so they're protected. The pieces are there, right, and they're easier to protect. Whereas black's pawns or on his fifth rank and down, so it's harder to protect those pawns. And you can see already that the queen on e3 is attacking the pawn on a5. So queen e5, and now Duda offers exchange of queens, which I believe is good for white because his position is better statically. He has control of the d file. His bishop is well placed. All of his other pieces are well placed. So why not offer the queen trade? Rapport takes. You would think that maybe he wouldn't want to trade queens, since I think the endings would be better for white, but I think the middle game, I think basically white is better with queens on the board, queens off the board. So maybe it's a little safer with the queens off the board. So queen takes f4. Again, I'll show you another option, queen c3 for example. Let's queen g5, and see, this gives of course white more attacking opportunities. All right, just for an example. But queens came off the board, g takes, and now bishop h5. Bishop struggling to get back in the game. King g3, g6. Rook comes to d3 to protect the f3 pawn. That way the king is mobile. Now I want to bring to your attention a famous game. I'm not going to show it to you, but I want you to look it up. And the game is, I'm coming off the top of my head, but it's called the King Walk game. If you look that up, King Walk. And the game is between Nigel Short with the white pieces and Jan Duda with the black pieces. I want to say the game was 1990, but I could be off by 1 or 2 years. But the game is nicknamed the King Walk. And that's because Nigel had Jan Duda in a similar position where he just walked his king up and basically delivered the coup de grace on and executed Duda's king. And when I saw this position, it reminded me of that game. And so go check it out if you had never seen that game. Like I said, go on chessgames.com or just type that in, King Walk game, Short Duda, and it should come right up for you. So rook b e8 was played. King h4, king g7, and king g5. Notice black cannot play f6 because of the pin of the f7 pawn. Rook comes to h8 and rook c7. Remember what I was telling you about pushing those pawns forward? They're fixed. It's easy to attack. It doesn't matter if you have a majority or not. If the pawns are stopped and fixed, then they become targets. So once they lose their mobility, they become a liability. I didn't even mean to rhyme, but that's what happens. So after rook c8, rook c7, rook c8. Rook e7, avoiding the trade. Rook c e8, and now rook e d7. So white's trying to avoid the trades until he's sure he has a clear win. Another thing you need to look out for, again, remember what I was saying earlier about the bishop. This is a threat, so the rook has to keep an eye on the e-file because bishop e6 will happen at some point because of this pin on the f7 pawn. So rook h f8, harassment again of the c pawn. And here, Rapport plays the move rook h8 here. And his idea is basically, let me see if I could give a few moves here. His idea is basically to, be able to move this bishop at some point maybe play bishop, not in this position, of course, but be able to play moves like rook h5 and drive this king away. If not, checkmate the king. So rook d7 happened, and of course black just does not have the time to do that, and he goes back. Rook hf8, possibly hoping for some type of perpetual. If rook ef8, again with this idea that I pointed out, say for instance to take on f3 with the bishop, right, and then rook h5 is mate. Look at that. Then what would happen in this position would just be bishop takes e6. Let's say bishop takes f3, rook takes f7, and black just doesn't have enough time. And that's how that would go. So he couldn't play excuse me, he couldn't play rook ef8 because of the attack on e6. So again, kudos to that move bishop c4 earlier. So instead he had to bring the rook back. So you can see how this was a waste of tempi right here. Rook h8. Here he should have just played rook c8 again. Rook e7, and he's still in trouble, but he would have just did a little better. So he wastes time here, time that he doesn't have. Rook d7, and he probably feels like, hey, maybe he can just repeat the position. But what happens is Duda finds a fantastic move and plays f5, and there's too many threats, and Rapport just has to give it up. He just resigns right here. So for example, on f5, if G takes f5, you can see the bishop hanging. Right, king takes. Game over right there. And the position is so good that white doesn't even have to take the bishop. He could still play e takes f5 and win the game after this. Other continuation is if e takes, again, there's too much firepower on f7, and the game would be over there. Another move that wins is also just f6, again driving the king back, and there's just too much firepower. So that concludes my analysis of the game between Jan-Christoph Duda and Richard Rapport from the Tata Steel Masters. I hope you guys enjoyed that analysis. I have a lot of notes on these games, so I'm sorry if the videos run a little long. I don't even give like all my notes. I'm actually like skimming through it, but I just want to make sure I'm delivering the information so that everybody from beginner to master can understand what's going on in these games, especially when it comes to the tactics, because ladies and gentlemen, tactics are your ABCs. You have to be able to see the tactics and understand what's going on in the position. So sometimes I might be over explaining. I understand that, but I just know how it was when I was just starting out, and before, of course, before the engine era, and you trying to understand like why a move was played, why, or you have a misunderstanding, and it's all most of the time it's based on some type of tactics. So I try to make sure I illustrate the tactics and put these graphics on. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Please get in the comment box below. Please check the links below. Please consider supporting my channel. And remember, I'm on chess.com. Same name is here, Chess Audiobooks, and also on Elite Chess and Twitter and Instagram. All right. I'll see you guys on the next video.